I'm standing under a large tree, really, of Pseudopanax, and this is Pseudopanax laetus, and you can see the strange 4 and 5 leaf arrangement and the seed heads, which look very much like the flower heads, but these are actually the seed heads. The flowers have long gone, and they were only little tiny white things coming out of the top of each of those black seeds. And when you look up into the tree, you can see that it's really quite distinct, and we know the genus Pseudopanax really quite well. However, there are now 4 other genuses with the name Panax in the name of the plant, or in the name of the genus. And I stopped to wonder what Panax actually meant, and why this is a Pseudopanax or a false Panax. And that led me to doing quite a bit of research, which I'll just try to explain. It's quite complicated, but when we'll go on to look at the other genuses which have the name Panax in them. So if you just bear with me a second. The Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus, who is widely regarded as the grandfather or doyen of all plant botany, who was working in the 18th century to classify plants, the first classification of plants that we actually ever had. And he gave the name Panax to the true ginsengs. Now, the word in Greek means panakes, and that means in English all healing and cure all. In botanical terms, Panax specifically refers to the genus of true ginsengs, and it literally means all healing. Pseudo is the Greek for false or resembling the true ginseng species. Now, ginsengs that belong to the species Panax come from China, Asia, and America, and they're very widely used for medicinal purposes. It's the roots of the ginseng, or the roots of the Panax, which have been used in medicine for thousands of years. So there we've got to the derivation of the word Panax. And so Pseudopanax are a different genus that early botanists thought resembled Panax in some way, the leaf form or the flower form, although it is not a true Panax. Sorry, I'm being attacked by a very large bumblebee. Oh, on we go. So the entire name means a genus that resembles Panax but is not actually a true Panax. Other genus that have Panax in their names can therefore also be said to have characteristics that resemble ginseng but are not true Panax either. Let's now go and look at some other Panax and see what we make of them, and see how they relate back to Pseudopanax and the original Panax or ginseng. So now we come to the first of the other Panaxes, and this is Metapanax davidii. And botanists have changed the name of this once or twice. It was a Pseudopanax at one time and a Notopanax at one time, but today it's called a Metapanax. And I think you can see probably that the flower arrangement is quite similar to Pseudopanax, but the leaf arrangement is very different. Some of the leaves are divided into 3 partial leaflets, but many of the leaves are just single or individual. Anyway, this plant was discovered in China in 1907 by Ernest Wilson, but it appears to have died out in the UK and was reintroduced in 1998 by Chris Brickell and Alan Leslie, who collected it again in southern China and it's also been subsequently collected again in Vietnam. So it's really very new and quite unusual in UK gardens. Not perhaps that exciting, but as a ornamental evergreen, starting to flower as it is here, it certainly is different and probably has architectural value in gardens. But Metapanax, so not a Pseudopanax, but a Metapanax. So again, something like ginseng or Panax, but a Metapanax, not a true Panax. And here we've got our third Panax for you. This is Merrilliopanax alpinus, which was planted here in 2020, so it's made an astonishing amount of growth in only 6 years. It has these sort of slightly rounded leaves when they're immature and great big leaves with 3 separate points on them when it's mature. I'll have to ask Carl to insert a picture of the flower, and you can see that actually the flower does have some similarities with Pseudopanax and Metapanax, although probably you need to be a botanist to get quite that far. But just look how attractive the bark is on this Merrilliopanax. This is a genus which was introduced, I think, from northern Vietnam by Krug Farm Nurseries, and Bledin and Sue Wynne Jones are responsible for introducing this extraordinary novelty into UK gardening. It seems to be perfectly happy in a Cornish climate and hasn't been touched by frost in any way. But let's just now go and look at a younger plant where we can see the leaf structure and the plant a bit more easily. So here's a rather younger Merrilliopanax alpinus, where we can actually see these rather corrugated leaves rather more closely. They're a lovely light green when they first come out, and you see the new growth starting off up the stem. You can also see where the flower hung down earlier this year, which we're going to add into the photograph. It's looking as though this is going to turn into a tree. It's really quite robust. Nothing perhaps to write home about in flowering terms, but in botanical terms, totally new to the UK and very interesting. So here we've got the third of our peculiar and relatively or almost totally unknown Panaxes. Now this is Diplopanax stachyanthus, which was again collected by Krug Farm Nurseries in maybe in Taiwan or northern Vietnam. I really can't remember, but in only 10 years it's become a large tree. And when we look closely at the leaves, they're entire and quite different from Merrilliopanax or Metapanax. But the flowers themselves, or what's left of them, again, they hardly have any petals, but the seed heads, which are beginning to form, are secreting a nectar which flies and wasps find terribly attractive. And if you think about how that seed head looks in comparison to the seed head on the Pseudopanax, which again had very large seeds and absolutely tiny flowers with virtually no petals, I suppose you could say the seed head exhibits the same characteristics of the true Panax or ginsengs from America or China. I'm afraid that we don't grow them, so I've only looked at pictures, and I have to say the resemblance between these seed heads and the ginsengs is quite tenuous, but nevertheless, this plant, Diplopanax stachyanthus, is an extraordinary rarity. It has very nice reddish new growth when it comes out. Many people who've looked at it who've never heard of a Diplopanax were scratching their heads as to which genus it might be put in, and perhaps botanists will look at this again and change the name and possibly remove the word Panax. But at the moment, this is the third of our new genuses with the name Panax in. And there was a fourth genus called Oreopanax. We had Oreopanax incises, which was demolished in Hurricane Goretti, and Oreopanax sectifolius, which I planted in about 2021, but I'm afraid it seems to have disappeared, and one must assume that it has died. Anyway, so that's the end of our little exploration into these unusual Panaxes. It was a little botanical puzzle that I wanted to try and understand for myself and share with you. And I hope that you would agree that we've seen some pretty unusual and rather different genuses of trees today.